So sometimes you want to alter the way the player behaves. And so in this video, we're actually going to be looking at, for instance, a power-up. So if the player collects an object, they have some change in functionality. In this case, we're going to change the fire rate of the player. But I need something to collect. So I'm going to start by adding a new object. There's actually a category called PowerUps in here, and I'll go use that. So let's use the bolt green PowerUp. You can use whatever you want. And I'm going to rename this because I want to know specifically what kind of power up this is. This is going to be a shoot power up or fire rate power up. Let's say fire rate power up. And then I'll drag this into the scene wherever I want the player to be able to collect a power up. And you could randomly place these. That's completely up to you, just like we did with the enemies. But for now, I'm just going to place them in the scene at certain intervals. So once I have them in the scene, the first thing we're going to want to do is actually collect them. But before I collect them, I need to set up some things. I'm going to go to the player and I'm going to edit a variable. And the one thing I want to know is shoot powered up. Okay, and I'm going to set that to start out with as false. Okay, so this variable will keep track of whether the player is powered up. The other thing I'm going to want to do is actually have a way of displaying to people that it's actually powered up. So I'm going to add a new object and we'll use just say this gold bolt. And I'm going to go edit that gold bolt immediately so that it's centered properly and that way I don't have to deal with that later. So I'm going to do the same thing with my fire rate power up. I'll edit the points, center that properly. It is going to move it slightly in my scene, but that's okay. All right, so now that we have a power up that we can collect and we have something that we can display when they're powered up, let's go into our events. And the first thing we're going to do is when the player collides with our power up. So if the blue player collides with our fire rate power up, then we want to do some things. And there's a couple things I want to do. The first thing is let's tell the blue player ship we created a Boolean variable. That's true or false means Boolean. Is power shoot up or is shoot powered up? And the answer will be true. Okay, so it's powered up. We also want to display our power up. So I'm going to add a gold bolt by creating it. And you could also hide or show it instead. I'm just going to create and delete it. Eh, you could make an argument either way. And I'm going to grab the player's position. So grab the blue player ship position. And I'm going to copy that and use the Y position as well. Now, I also know from experience that I don't want it to be right on top of the player, so I'm actually going to move it a bit down below the player so that the indicator will show up below the player. So let's say okay there. And if we play it now, it will show up, but it will never go away. And so I'm going to want a timer. So I'm going to add an action. We'll create, it could be a timer specifically for the ship if you wished. So if we go here and we type in timer, we'll start a timer. We'll call this fire rate, let's see, timer. Okay, and I'm going to copy that because I also need to be able to turn that timer off after a certain amount of time. So I'm going to add another event, and when that blue player ship's timer reaches a certain value, and I copied that name so I can just paste it in there. Let's say it reaches 3 seconds. And you could decide how you wanted to do the timing. That's up to you. So if the fire rate timer is greater than 3 seconds, then what we'll need to do is we'll need to stop the timer and change the variable for the ship, okay? Because remember, we told it that it is powered up. Well, we need to turn that off. So I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. When the timer goes off, that will become false. So it turns it on up here, it turns it off down here. And just like we created our gold bolt up here, we're going to delete it down here. Okay. So we've created it and deleted it based on whether it's on or off. So if we play this now, I should be able to run over this. But notice what's happening. Because I didn't delete the PowerUp when I collided with it, it just keeps doing this over and over and over. So we need to make sure that when we collide with it, we also delete that PowerUp, or else it'll keep creating indicators, and we don't want that. So now it should just show a single indicator. But we've got a problem. The indicator drifts away from us. So what we really want to be able to do is make that indicator stay with us all the time. And so I'm going to add an event that it always happens. And I'm going to tell that gold bolt, I'm going to set its position. So position. And I want that position to be the same position as the player. Now you may remember I kind of already did this right here. Okay, so I could come in here and copy this and then add my action. I don't want to create the player, I just want to reposition it. So I'm going to go to the gold bolt, tell it that its position should be the same as the ship in both the X and the Y, but remember that for the Y position I had added a number to offset it from the player. So I'm going to say, oops, I need to set those to that. So what this is going to do is every instant it's going to try to move this gold bolt to the player's ship. Now this is not the most efficient way to do this, but it's probably the easiest. Okay, and so remember that this should not be in the fire rate timer though. It should actually be right here. But remember that there is one thing I can be checking, because this will only need to happen if I'm powered up. So I can check to see, is the blue player's ship, and I'll get the Boolean value. So is it powered up? And if it is, then we want to update that position. It would work the other way. It's just not very efficient because it would always be trying to move this even if it didn't exist. So let's go ahead and play that. And now when I collide, there is my indicator and it's following me. And then after 3 seconds, it goes away. So we've got the first part of this working, which is we have an indicator that shows up. We have a variable that tells us that it is powered up. We've kept it tracking with the player, and then it disappears when the power up is done. But what does the power up actually do? So what I want to do is I want to change the speed at which we fire. And so I'm going to go find the code that controls fire rate, and it's right here. The shot cooldown. Right now it's set to 1 second. Well, I'm going to duplicate this event. So copy and then paste it. Oops, whole event, paste. And sometimes I want it to be 1 second, but sometimes I want it to be much less. So 0.25, let's say. I just need to decide when I want it to be 1 second and when I want it to be 0.25 seconds. Well, I know that when it's not powered up, so Boolean. So if its power up is not on, then I'm going to keep the 1 second. But I can copy this then and paste it. And for this one, it's going to check to see if it is powered up. Okay, so I basically have two events that look almost the same. And there is a way to organize this differently, but for now, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like this. And I'm going to play. And now if I hit my power up, I'm shooting, I hit the power up, notice the fire rate, it changes, and then the fire rate slows back down after the power up has cooled off. So that gets us to the basics of a power up. Like I said earlier, there are ways to change the way this is structured and make it easier to read, but for now that will work.